Welcome into the Inquirer podcast. Happy New Week. It's Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner with you today. We're going to talk about some of the X factors for Illinois football going into the 2025 season. We got a big week of podcasts this week. Jay Lehman's going to join us late in the week. We're going to talk about the offseason with Jay. We're going to talk about some scheme with Jay. I'm excited about that. And then we're going to do our Big Ten basketball offseason roundtable. We can do it a month early this year because it seems like everything's wrapped up. Michael Trotter lined up to join us later in the week, so that should be out by Friday as well. But Joey, you're leading us off, man, and you got away for the weekend, right? You feel rested?
I don't feel rested yet. I will eventually feel rested. I got away, went down to Nashville for the weekend. We'll call it some. I'll send you some receipts for a little bit of some arena scouting for Bridgestone ahead of the December game down there. It was good to get away and enjoy Nashville. Did Broadway for an afternoon, and that was more than enough for me, and hit up some maybe a little quieter bars around Nashville.
I was gonna say, what's your scene when you get down to Nashville? Because you got the scout for us. If we all get down there in December, I'm still like, we got to think, is there an actual Big Ten football championship game we have to cover? We just got to think about that. But yeah, Tennessee, Illinois men's basketball in Nashville. What's the scout? Where do we go?
I found a couple places. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to really revisit some of the names. But you give me a table and a beer, and we'll go from there. So we're going to probably eliminate Broadway. We're going to be the only people to stay downtown and Uber away from Broadway when we go down to cover that. But so a couple places in East Nashville we popped into, a good brewery called Tenfold. Just kind of hit a little bit here and there. Give me a table, man. Just do that and have some conversation. Now, I say that like Broadway's fun, right? It is. If you're going, you've got to do it. But it's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, you and I kind of agree on the scenes we like. Dive bars, best. That's where I like to find it, especially in Nashville when you get some live music at some of those places. Man, it's fantastic. But speaking of Illinois basketball, before we get into the X factors, we're gonna talk a little Illinois football recruiting. There's one baseball note I want to hit on before we dive into these X factors. Came out, John Rothstein on it today. Illinois will play UConn on November 28th. That's Black Friday at Madison Square Garden. I thought the first thing that came to mind for me was like, man, Brad Underwood loves playing there. He loves playing at Madison Square Garden. Fourth straight year, the Illini will play there. They obviously beat Texas, beat FAU, and got really just driven off the floor last year by Duke. So you want to exercise those demons, but it's also, yes, you want to exercise those Elite Eight demons, the 30-0 run that UConn had against you in that behemoth of a national championship team a couple years ago. But man, Joey, this is a fun schedule. You got Alabama November 19th at the United Center. You got UConn November 28th in Madison Square Garden. Tennessee December 6th in Nashville, as we were talking about, and then Missouri in late December, as they always do in St. Louis towards Christmas time. Probably got one more big game in there somewhere. It'll be interesting to see what Brad Underwood does, but he is not afraid to schedule like this. He loves scheduling like this to figure out what his team is made of. It helps your RPI, helps your strength of schedule, all those things. You need to find out a lot about your team. So what are your thoughts on Illinois, UConn, and Black Friday?
I mean, exactly what you said. You get a chance to exercise two kind of the significant demons of at least the regular season. Well, not the regular season, UConn, but two big demons of the recent resurgence of the Underwood era. Those were just ugly games, right? And the way that it went down isn't really reflective of where this program is or had been. So that's a big one for Illinois. Brad Underwood loves to play on Madison Square Garden. And Illinois is at a position now, Jeremy, that they are that game that like national TV station, CBS, Fox, whatever, I don't know what it's going to air on, but Illinois is a draw to put on their primetime slot on those big, everyone's full, maybe a few too many sitting around the living room watching college sports or whatever it is that they're watching. Like that's a step forward in terms of eyes for where this program is and what people think nationally of the Illinois brand.
I would imagine this is a Fox game, right? Because or a Peacock or something like that, because that's what the Big East has.
Shut it down if they put it on Peacock. People are going to be mad.
But it won't be ESPN because the Big East is not in business with them anymore. So I would imagine this is a Fox. They always do the Black Friday game with Nebraska and Iowa. So is this the lead into that? That'll be interesting. The one conflict that some fans will have to think of, including myself, is the Bears play at 2:00 that day. I think it's Amazon against the Philadelphia Eagles on Black Friday. So there'll be a lot of sports on that day, but it's going to be a national broadcast somewhere. So the eyes will be on you. But it's another great test. Right now at Bart Torvik, Illinois is number 9 in his preseason projections based on the numbers. UConn is number 11. Alex Caravan, really the only guy back from that Elite 8 team a couple years ago. He's a senior. But it's a good team. They've had some good transfers, a very good freshman class coming in. It's not as big of a team, right? Illinois is going to be the bigger team here. I think UConn could be a little bit more athletic, but a good test. I think Illinois has a chance here. This isn't as behemoth of a roster as Illinois was going up against 2 years ago, but I love it. Basketball, give me all these matchups, right? Because you are rewarded for these. If you win, it's a huge marquee win. If you lose, it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's notably a Big East team, right? Like Brad Underwood had usually gone to the SEC for some of these powerhouse, and we've seen that obviously still play true for next season. But yeah, I mean, and for UConn, Illinois is a team that they're probably saying similar, right? Hey, that's a big test. This team's they're old, they're big, they've got all of these things. So it makes sense. It fits perfectly. Another East Coast game. I did wonder, you and I, like, if we got a red eye back in here, how are we going to do that? Because
we'll only Northwestern be person to that game. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big deal. Like Illinois basketball is a big deal. We knew that they're going to. What I want to see next, Jeremy, is we know Brad likes the home and homes. Yeah. So is he going to try to find another big time home and home partner for this? Because you have like neutral site games, right? With Alabama, with Tennessee again coming up. But I know that we've seen him schedule those big games to come to the State Farm Center and a return trip to Knoxville, or whatever the case may be. And I just can't sit here and think that he's not searching for those and getting a big time, hopefully a weekend game in Champaign.
So who would you want, Joey?
I mean, we've talked, you and Piper talked about this at length. Kansas is the answer. Yeah. You got to get that. I think Iowa State would be good too. Yeah. I think those two teams doing a home and home, and the way it gets in Ames, the way it gets in Champaign. I mean, two very good teams. That would be a fun one. Those two come to mind. I'm probably missing a super obvious one.
If you want to stay in the Big East, I think Creighton would be cool. Bring them to Champaign. You go to Omaha, play at an arena you've played at before a couple years ago in the NCAA tournament. That's a really easy trip for Illini fans if they want to make that as well. It's a really, really good program that can test you. I thought of St. John's because of the Madison Square Garden thing, but you just made that up with UConn. So maybe that's a future one. But BYU was one I thought about because, it would be kind of fun. AJ DeSanta, you could play him, potentially number 1 pick coming up. So there's a lot of good options, but I would expect Brad Underwood to try and get one more of those, right? It seems like he's been working on that. I do want to mention this. The fact that Alabama, UConn, Tennessee, want to play Illinois too. Just take notice of that, because last year UConn had Texas, Indiana, North Carolina, Gonzaga, St. John's, or St. John's in their conference, but Gonzaga, Texas, Indiana, North Carolina, Kansas on their schedule. Right. So they're trying to schedule some of the toughest teams in the country, and they want to schedule Illinois. We know Illinois is one of those programs now where it's a top 25 kind of program. But the fact that these other schools want to schedule Illinois, I think says a lot about the program and what Brad Underwood is doing.
Yeah. Gonzaga would also be a fun one, but I'm also thinking where fans could easily travel. So Kansas comes to mind. That's why Iowa State comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Arizona, it's probably the travel's less attractive, obviously, because you think of driving distances, but I hope you see one of those pop up here over the next couple months as a schedule kind of filters out.
I've shied away from Arizona because they just did one, but they just did Tennessee and they re-upped that one. So we can't rule something out like that. All right. It is June now, June 2nd as we record this. Big recruiting month and a big recruiting week ahead for Illinois football, Joey. We've talked about how April is kind of really been good for Illinois. I mean, they had a really good month of April with their official visits, have gotten some really good prospects and made some inroads with some really good prospects and helps them land several of their commits already in this class, which currently is number 12 in the country. It's going to come down a little bit as these other schools fill up throughout June, but June is still a huge month. They got 15 official visitors that we know so far, for this weekend coming up, including 9 commits, 6 uncommitted guys. They want to add to this class. The staff is throughout the country. They were at Michigan. They're going to be at SMU today. They're going to be at North Central and Naperville today. They are throughout the country at satellite camps as well. Really looking at future targets, 2027, 28 kids, especially. And you see new offers going out to a lot of those kids. But then you also got top targets visiting elsewhere, right? Like J.C. Anderson was at Ole Miss. Max Sutter was at Ohio State this past weekend. Nick Hankins was at Missouri, just to name a few of those in-state guys. It's a big recruiting month ahead, and we'll be covering the hell out of it over the next couple of weeks. But June is still the massive month. Like April, Illinois, I thought did a really good job of planning, executing that, and making sure they got out ahead of the curve, and it has worked for them. But June's still a significant month throughout the country in recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, it's kind of put a bow on Illinois' class, at least in the sense of right now, you still got to hold on and really make sure that bow is tied by December. But yeah, everything you talked about, Jeremy, one of my bigger stories when we were prepping for this, one of my bigger first bullet point was J.C. Anderson / the way the tight ends. J.C. Anderson's not visiting Illinois this month. He visited in April, but that is the biggest story. He's taking these other visits, and I'm curious to see how that shakes out, what Illinois does in whichever direction that shakes. And then you got to hold on to your guys. But June is still a premier month. I think I'm really wondering what that looks like in 2026 when, does April turn into what we've seen June be the last 3 or 4 years? But yeah, there's still a lot of big targets out there for Illinois. There's still a lot of big targets committed that you got to hold on to guys all the way through this whole thing. And we've seen that with running back right now. And I know we're going to get into that, Jeremy, as we talk about the official visitor coming up this weekend. But yeah, just fill out the rest of this class and try to close it in the way that you started, which is really strong and with some good targets on board.
I want to give you the chance. I talked to Ryan Easton about this last week. Of the 6 uncommitted guys visiting this weekend that we know of so far, Nick Hankins, Belleville West cornerback, 4-star composite. Tucker Ashford, 3-star Texas edge rusher. AJ Marks, 3-star cornerback out of Detroit, plays at IMG Academy. 3-star running back, Nelson Wheeler out of Omaha, Nebraska, teammate of Landon Von Segern, offensive lineman who's committed to Illinois. 0-4s, yes, is visiting Illinois this weekend. Barrington, offensive lineman, and Downers Grove North tight end Will Vala. Which is the most intriguing to you, or one or two is most intriguing to you?
I think Hankins is there because, like, one of my other bullet points is how's cornerback fill itself out here for Illinois, especially after Victor Singleton flipped to Texas A&M earlier this spring. And Hankins is an in-state guy. They were early on him. They played this thing. Typically, we've talked about Illinois playing these recruitments very, very well and hitting the right notes all the way through. And I think they've done that with Hankins, but you're in a huge battle, right? You've got Tennessee in the mix. You've got Missouri in the mix. And those are good programs, SEC programs. And we talk about, Missouri carries weight in the Metro East. They do. I mean, it's an SEC team close to home in that area. So how does that play out, especially given the need? Like, you could use a headlining cornerback in this recruiting class after the Singleton flip. So he is one just because I think he's really talented. He's an in-state kid. You're really battling like heck for him and seeing what you can do, and you've done it well. 0-4 is another guy. It's like, okay, he's visiting. That's a step.
Close
finally,
right? Like I've been thinking that for 5 months with 0-4s. It's kind of been going longer than we thought. And, he's been given interest to Northwestern. I don't know if he took an official visit there for sure last week because he was at State for the shot put. So kudos to him for that. Indiana has been in the mix, like to get an official visit, but it feels like Illinois has been in a good spot there. Kind of reminds me of Cameron Brooks. Like I put a crystal ball in for Cameron Brooks in January the year prior, and it didn't happen until June, but never really felt like it was in doubt. It was just kind of like the only doubt was, why is this taking a little longer than I thought? But maybe Illinois is still in a really good position. But this official visit, I think, is obviously massive for all that.
Yeah, those two in-staters probably jump off the page. For me, I'm interested in Will Vala because I think Illinois wants 2 tight ends in this class. And obviously, right now, we've long said we think they're in a better position for J.C. Anderson than Max Sutter. It's like, okay, JC's making these visits, and that's going to come to an end here in literally about a month. On July 1st, he's going to commit to a school. So that's kind of in the closing stages of his recruitment. And Will Vala is a guy who really has blown up a little bit. And it looks like Max Suter, I still think he's, Alabama's been put in a good position here. Obviously, I know the word out of Ohio State was they did a good job on his official visit this past weekend. But now Will Vala is an interesting guy, right? Because he seems like that next in-state tight end up in this duo it looks like Illinois is trying to put together at the position.
Yeah, I'd push for Will Vala. I don't think there's any question. Like, I'd push to get that done because I would take 2 tight ends. I think it's a position you need to continually upgrade the talent level. They've done a pretty good job in the transfer portal of kind of patching the holes there, but Will Vala would be one of the 2 best prep prospects this staff has landed at tight end, in my opinion. At least just by the pedigree, by the ranking, all those things. Like, I think he and Logan Farrell would be the best tight ends they've had. We'll see what Tanner Hollinger, Grant Smith become, but those were developmental prospects. Didn't have any other Power 4 offers when Illinois offered. Like, Vala has legitimate Big Ten interest. Illinois got right out in front right before everyone else kind of offered here. So they did a good job there. They're getting the first official visit. Wisconsin sounds like they're going to take a couple tight ends maybe from this past week. So does that take them out? Makes you an Illinois-Indiana battle, kind of the resurgent teams here in the Big Ten. I would push. I'd push hard. And then if you can add him, you try to add one more. And obviously J.C. Anderson's the guy we'd feel better about than Mac, but I'd push hard for him. There'd be no question for me is, bird in the hand, get a talented tight end. And I like him a lot. He's big, a little undersized compared to JC and Mac when it comes to length, but get the ball in his hands and he can make some plays. And obviously, Joey, that's what they need. They need more dynamicism at that position. And I think he's a guy that get the ball in his hands and he can make plays after the catch.
Yeah, that's ultimately going to segue into an X Factor discussion that you and I are going to have here in a couple minutes. But yeah, I agree with you. And again, you're getting if you can close that down, push to close it down, that'd be an in-state recruiting win, right? You just keep stacking those up, and he's good. Like Logan Farrell, I think you and I are both really high on what he can be for Illinois, especially being his size with his ability to get downfield. But yeah, it's Will Vala. If you get Will Vala, it doesn't mean you're out on J.C. Anderson, because I just want to emphasize a lot that we do think this is a 2 tight end recruiting class here. But Anderson just wrapped up an Ole Miss visit. He's got Auburn and North Carolina still on the schedule. I might be missing. Am I missing?
No, that's it.
Ole Miss, Auburn, North Carolina. Yeah. So it's getting down to the final stretch of him, and we'll see how that plays out. But Vala's an interesting guy for me. And then, Jamie, I want to see how the offensive line shakes out. Like, what's the last piece to this? They already have, as you mentioned, Landon Bob Segrin, Casey Tolman. Am I missing one?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah, you're still sitting out there. Micah Smith is still sitting out there. Kai Pritchard is still sitting out there. Owen Fours is now visiting this weekend. So what's the final piece, or what are the final pieces? If you can get one of those big fish from, in the way of Smith or Kai Pritchard to jump on board, how does the bow get put on Bart Miller's offensive line class in 2026?
Yeah, you hit it. Like, I think the interesting positions right now for me are offensive line, tight end, because they need tight ends. They need multiple, I think, in this class and don't have one yet. Offensive line, I think they want to take 2 more. They're in on some big battles. You'd like to lock down a kid like Owen Fours and State Kid. And then defensive back, just because you only got one right now. And you got a couple kids. I think A.J. Marks you're sitting well with. Nick Hankins, you're battling Missouri and Tennessee. It's not going to be easy. But then you got a couple other kids lined up. Kamal King, a safety out of Florida. If Illinois wants him, I think they push and get him. And then Rodarian Daniels out of Mississippi, a cornerback who's set up for a midweek official visit later on in the month. We'll see. He's got really loaded offer list, but he seems to really like Corey Parker. So that's definitely a position. I know they want to add an edge rusher, and they got a couple, and Tucker Ashford, Jalen Stewart, Caden Bennett, all lined up. So it seems like they just want to land one of those 3 guys. But those 3 positions, offensive line, defensive back, tight end, those are the ones I'm really looking out for.
Another name we need to bring up with DB is Jacob Eberhardt. That's turned into quite a national recruitment, but we know he was on campus. He visited in April. That's really blown up. That recruitment has taken off. There's some ties to Illinois. His dad played at Illinois. They got him on campus for an official St. Louis kid. We'll see how that goes, but
and a very
I wanted to
recruitment. Yeah.
I did want to bring that up in the discussion of DBs, because that's a really big fish still out there and possibly on the board for Illinois. But yeah, I don't worry about them recruiting DBs. The sell's good. The eval's good. The connections are good. They're going to get corners. And also they've loaded up, especially a DB, the last couple classes. So you don't need to take, a ton of kids to round out this 2026 class, but you're still still battling for some big names out there and some talent out there.
And just love to take advantage of the sell you got with, Corey Parker and Aaron Henry there when you have Devin Witherspoon, Kirby Joseph, and Quinyon Mitchell to sell, and not to mention Quan Martin and Sidney Brown and Xavier Scott. Done a pretty dang good job. All right, last thing I want to get to, and I don't have a ton on this because it's not like I'm in the weeds with Illinois baseball, but Vytas Valincius just entered the transfer portal. According to multiple reports, Kendall Rogers at D1 Baseball, On Threes, Pete Nakos reported that. But it's just worth mentioning because it's the second straight year an Illini Star baseball hitter has entered the transfer portal. Ryan Moorman went to Ole Miss last year, 11 homers this year for the Rebels, who are obviously a very, very good program. But Valencius was a very good player the last 2 years, all Big Ten second team selection, kid from Lockport in Will County, originally started at South Carolina, picked the Gamecocks over the Illini as a prep recruit, then went to John A. Logan. Illinois got him from there. But yeah, it just stinks, Joey, just because it feels like Illinois baseball is a pretty solid program. Won a Big Ten championship last year. Valencius was part of that, but it just feels like they don't have the resources to compete. And these are the hard decisions you have to make now, right? Is like, how much money can you put into baseball when you are trying so hard to make basketball and football work, and men's golf, keep that as competitive as possible? With the SEC, we know how important baseball is. It's more important than basketball for some of these programs, I would think, like in Ole Miss at sometimes. Now, Chris Beard might be changing that, but at SEC baseball, like a lot of times that's the second biggest sport down there, and there's just more money that's involved. So I can't blame a kid like Valencius if he wants to go that route, or Moorman who went that route, because it's just great opportunity to play on a bigger stage. But the Big Ten baseball is it's not the same. It's a different level than SEC, ACC, and some of these other programs, especially out in California. But it just stinks. But this is kind of the reality of allocating resources.
Yeah, I mean, for Big Ten football, it's closed the gap on SEC. You can, maybe even tide it past it, however you want to. That's not really the weeds I'm caring to get into at this moment. But for football, baseball is still a really significant gap there. And you look at what's left in the College World Series and how that shakes out, who's deep in the postseason. And it's teams that nice weather teams, South teams, right? Like Big 12, SEC, ACC, whatever it is. And yeah, you're right. Like, athletic departments have to make a decision on where they want to allocate these funds to. And every school, I don't think it's a conference by conference thing, right? There's probably some pretty real overlap in terms of which conferences focus on which sports, but everyone's going to have men's golf is not going to be the Big Ten. Big Ten teams aren't going to fund men's golf like Illinois does, right? Not all of them are going to do that. You can go right on down the list for just programs that have good traditions. But baseball, you got to kind of figure out where that's going to go. And it's not an enviable spot for I would imagine, for Dan Hartlib, and kind of trying to watch these guys that you've developed and have produced and won games for you and won a Big Ten championship a year ago for you. And all of a sudden they're getting plucked away to the SEC. And yeah, I mean, now you kind of look at
you feel like a mid-major.
Yeah, you look at the old Pac-12 and they're probably feeling the same way, right? It's like, oh, okay, bye. And that's kind of, it's where it is. And I don't think we're trying to defend it or say it's great, because it stinks, but that's the reality right now. And the SEC's a power. I don't know if he's going to the SEC. I assume there's probably some attractive.
He started in the SEC. It makes sense if he went to the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's attractive teams down there that could probably use his skills. So yeah, man, I don't want to pretend like I have a ton more on it either, but it's a new age of what it is, and which teams really fund or want to not fund, but allocate all those resources or want to push to use that. And it's part of it.
All right, let's dive into it. Joey, you wrote about some X Factor possibilities on the Illini football roster. It's kind of a fun time of year. We can kind of dive into this. Like today, I just ranked the transfer additions. They made 20. By the way, I
saw that. I was away for the weekend, so I didn't proof it, and I saw it. It's like, why is he starting at 20? It doesn't feel like it had been 20 guys, but
especially for a team that returned so much of its 2D, but they have been really aggressive in the transfer portal. And I was just like, all right, like, let's see how they all fit. And like, there's a lot of depth pieces, right? And we have seen how that can impact a team in October and November and into the bowl season. But it was just a fascinating exercise to go through. But it's kind of fun to go through some of these things now that we can have some slow time and kind of dive into this roster. but I was just like, wow, how aggressive they have been. But last week you also wrote about some X factors on this team. Like, I think we know who the main players are going to be, who the starters are going to be. There's some starters that could be on this thing, but the X factor definition, I looked this up just to kind of set the scene. It's a variable in a given situation that could have the most significant impact on the outcome. So we know a quarterback is the biggest factor, right? But I always think of X factor as something that could swing, right? Could win a game here or win a game there when you're not totally expecting it, right? So for me, it's kind of like an under the radar or just somebody who could help swing the season one way or the other, but it's not a guarantee. That's kind of how I think of X factors.
Yeah, to me, it's the Illinois has these expectations this year. Who are the guys that are gonna that you don't have, you don't think of first come to mind when you're talking about Illinois football? Who are going to help take them to those expectations beyond your Luke Altmyers, your Gabe Ackuses, your Xavier Scotts, and it was a fun exercise, and I'm glad we're doing a pod on it because there were we had been texting about like, hey, could it be him or him? And at one point he said, well, you could just him, and him as one bullet point. I'm like, okay, hold on. Now we're just naming 8 guys on the roster. But we can talk about that a little bit with some more context on this. It was fun to think about some of those guys who can lift this team to that 10-win mark, to that college football playoff mark, or wherever it goes.
Yeah, because like I could do X factor being Caden Fagan's health, right? Caden Fagan's health could be a big one, and I'll add somebody because of this. And I know you have one here too, but like I think we understand that. I think we understand Caden Fagan is really, really important to this season, but he's a starter. I think he's going to be one of the star players as long as he's healthy. So it is a big factor of the season, but it's a reason we didn't go with him. There's so many different ways you can go this. So it's
like you say, Luke Altmyer's health too, right?
Yes.
I mean, the health of your starting quarterback is
kind of
inevitably the biggest X factor, right? But we know that.
All right, so give me your the poster boy X factor for you for this Illinois football season when you did this piece.
Cole Rusk. They brought him in to change and to elevate the passing game at the tight end position. And we say that, and that we're not knocking on Tip Ryman, who is a 3rd-round pick. We're not knocking on Tanner Arkin, who is as good as anyone on the roster at the line of scrimmage. But this just not been an area that Illinois has really excelled in with tight end in recent years, since Daniel Barker, frankly. At the end of Lovie Smith or during Lovie Smith and the first year of Brett Bielema, Cole Rusk was brought in to be that. He was brought in to be that downfield threat. I don't think you would go in thinking he's going to be a guy who's going to excel at the line of scrimmage. If he can hold his own, that's wonderful. But you didn't recruit him to enhance your run game. You recruited him throwing the ball down the seam and change the game. He was hurt last year. He told me he had the trifecta of the knee injury, and the ACL was obviously a part of that. We did see him moving around in spring ball. We've seen him working out with Luke Altmyer. He's running, he's moving. Everything seems to be really well on track with him, but he's still jumping to the Big Ten. He's still coming off of a knee injury. We've heard these ideas of him, and honestly, even talking back now, the practice reports of him and that the 10 days or whatever it was of fall camp, may not have even been that many before he got hurt. Things were really encouraging about what we'd heard in the moment, what we've heard in retrospect. And if you can, especially with turnover at wide receiver, and I know we know they have talent there, but if you can have that tight end to elevate that even further, I think that's obviously a big deal for Luke Altmyer, who is very close friends with Cole Rusk. The two live together. I don't know if they still do, but I believe they do. They've been working out together. They were close throughout Luke's ups and downs and Cole Rusk rehab. So that he's number one for me because I think he can take this offense up a notch in terms of what they can do downfield.
Yeah, I'm all for this being the number one X factor because Cole Rusk could mean a lot. And it's such an unfortunate injury because you imagine he could have been a factor last year, but also just could have been another piece that Luke Altmyer would have trust in, that he doesn't have a lot of that rapport with the receivers he's throwing to this year. So even though there's a deep group, it's just, who do I go to when I need somebody I can trust? And Cole Rusk just hasn't played a lot, but there is a special relationship there. They are clearly really good friends. They're working out together. So they're working on that. But there are 2 big question marks about Cole Rusk. Number one is coming back from the injury. And for me, nowadays with ACLs, if it's ACL, MCL, PCL, like you said, the trifecta, they can come back from that physically. I've just seen so many times of how a player sometimes has to go through some hurdles mentally. And we saw it with Kenenna Odeluga last year. It just took him some time to kind of trust his body again. I think anybody who's been through a serious, especially leg injury, knows what that feels like. It's just, you don't completely trust yourself. You don't completely move the same, and it takes some time to come back. So that's a hurdle he's got to overcome. And then, as you mentioned, Joey, he hasn't played at the FBS level yet. While he's got the talent, he's got the size, he just hasn't been tested by Big Ten defenders and Big Ten defensive coordinators yet. So that's another question mark. So I love the idea of Cole Rusk, but he's got some question marks coming into this year. And I think it's why it's important you added a couple transfers here. I think Davin Stoffel is more the inline tight end. He does move fluidly. He looks like a Big Ten tight end coming from South Dakota State. I like adding him. I think he can kind of be in that Henry Boyer role, but probably a better pass catcher. But Christian Abney is a really interesting addition because I do feel like it was a hedge on Cole Rusk in case things aren't perfect yet, because they really didn't have anybody else that can kind of fit that, be a dynamic pass catcher. I think Christian Abney does. He's raw at tight end still, even though he's played 2 years at Ball State, but he can catch the ball, get the ball, and then make plays after the catch with it. So I thought that addition was a smart hedge for Illinois just because of the unknowns of Cole Rusk. But if Cole Rusk can be a 30 catch guy, a red zone guy, I think that would be huge for this offense because they haven't had that in this offense since Brett Bielema has been here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the rapport with Luke Altmaier should help that, right? And I'm not going to speak for Cole Rusk. I haven't talked to him since during the season when I caught up with him, but probably we talk about coming back mentally. It might help when your quarterback trusts the heck out of you.
Yeah.
And it's not afraid to look at you and will work with you as you kind of work your way back on to the football field. But he can be that guy. I know, there was a lot of buzz about Stoffel. If you listened around during spring ball and what he can bring, I don't know that any of the younger guys are going to be in that position yet. Everyone wants to talk about recruits. I understand that. I don't know that Hollinger is going to be in that position yet in his development. Grant Smith and Logan Farrell, both freshmen. But yeah, Abney does feel like a hedge. And it also feels like, just as an aside, the spring portal window felt like depth hedges all the way through. Like Brett Bielema knows where this team can go, and it's like he's turning every rock to make sure if X, then we have this guy, right? And otherwise,
they didn't do it in 2023, and it killed them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So I think Cole Rusk is literally the biggest X factor on the team in terms of what he can bring to this team. If obviously all the way back, if the adjustment goes as seamlessly as it sounded like it was going during training camp a year ago. And I just don't want to undersell the relationship with Luke, because I do think that is a really, really meaningful part of this.
If Cole Rusk got 30 catches, do you feel right? Like that would be great. Like that would be an offense changer just to have that kind of target in the middle of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to go back and look at tight end, like the tight end leaders of the last few years. I think I've done it in my position primer for the last 3 years, and like that would be very high. I don't want to say for certain that would be very high up there in terms of tight end production over the last few years. You're gonna look it up now?
Well, I know Tip was the highest since I think Lou Dorsey, and that includes Daniel Barker, and it wasn't like huge numbers, right? Tip had 203 yards receiving. I think that was the most of a tight end since Lou Dorsey. Daniel Barker might have a year.
And he had 19 catches in 22 and 23.
Yeah.
Tip Ryman did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, 30.
So Barker had 273, 268. You haven't had somebody top 300 since Lou Dorsey.
Yeah. I mean, you get 30 and 300, Bielema and Robbie Disher cartwheeling down Kirby, right? I mean, that's a huge selling point in your recruiting area. Obviously, it's elevated your offense and kind of gotten back to what we thought Brett Bielema, Barry Lunny, what you were going to see out of the tight end position more at Illinois that just hasn't really come to fruition during the first years of Brett Bielema's tenure.
All right, I'm going to throw one out there that you had in your piece. Kenenna Odeluga. His end of the season was pretty phenomenal. He had 3 sacks. I think he played like 100 snaps, if that, on the season. But they missed him at the beginning of last year. They really missed a weak side linebacker, and we're kind of wondering what was happening there. Ryan Mead did play very well in that position towards the end of the season, and I thought Archie McDaniel did a great job with all of those linebackers. But Odeluga in 144 pass rush snaps in his career, has 24 pressures and 6 sacks. That's an amazingly efficient pass rusher. So he's not used like a traditional linebacker. Again, I love this about Aaron Henry and what they're doing on their defense here recently, the sub packages they use to put guys in positions to succeed. But in that dime package, he has been a dynamic pass rusher. He's built like an action figure, but he's small, right? He's 5'11" for the most part, but a really fast, twitchy guy, really smart player. If you can get a full season of what he gave you over the last 3 or 4 games, this could be the second best pass rusher on the team besides Gabe Akis. So for me, it's like he might not top 300 snaps, but in those 300 snaps, he could be really efficient as a pass rusher, just kind of this defensive weapon that Illinois deploys. In losing Ryan Mead, there's a lot of snaps there. I know we kind of put Malachi Hood in there. You could really put any linebacker beyond Dylan Rosiak as an X factor because Hood is that guy, Odeluga. I would qualify JoJo Hayden in this group. Daniel Brown was used in really interesting ways in the bowl game. Just how they deploy those linebackers. But Odeluga was really good at getting to the quarterback late in the season. It's kind of what we saw the year prior. So I think him coming back fully from that injury, confident, and he's got some leadership qualities. I thought he was a great pick for an X factor.
Yeah, I think he was that's a position where it could be Odeluga / Malachi Hood / JoJo Hayden, Daniel Brown, Ish Conte, who looks the part of the JUCO transfer, number 1 JUCO linebacker in the country coming in this offseason. So that whole group, right? How does the weak side linebacker shake out? Is it going to be it feels like a by committee approach, right? Depending on the packages. I think Malachi Hood is going to get a lot of snaps. I think Kenendo DeLuga is going to get a lot of snaps. JoJo Hayden's listed as an edge, but that's in those packages, that weak side linebacker, it's an overhang linebacker. It plays like an edge rusher. All of those guys qualify because you do need, like, one of my bigger questions about the defense this spring was who is your second leading pass rusher, whether that's pressures, whether that's sacks and getting home entirely across from Gabe Akis. And I think, your brain wants to go to edge, right? Because that's what you think of a lot. And I think that's fair. But I think weak side linebacker certainly qualifies in that because in a lot of packages it plays pretty much in the same role or similar role to what an edge rusher does.
Yeah, and I got something I want to bring up with Aaron Henry a little bit later, but I'll save that one. So give me another X factor, Joe.
There's a big hitter out there that I'm going to save it, and I'll stay on the defense for the time being. But I think Angelo McCollum's the guy that they have clearly tried to. They didn't redshirt him a year ago. They traveled him a year ago. He's the guy that Terrence Jamison told you we're really encouraging him to go push for that starting spot. I think he can be a really disruptive nose tackle at that position. And I think if you look at what the defense got out of T.Y. Edwards being an effective pass rushing nose tackle, that added a lot to this defense and elevated it in a position that typically isn't that pass rushing spot. But Angelo McCollum could add that. He's not a very big guy in terms of length, but he's quick. He's very, very quick. He can get off the ball. He's powerful. I think he could be a guy, as you look at that position, we say he's an X factor because you still have Kurt Neal. You still have, where does Jeremiah Warren slot in? Is it versatile? Is he kind of locked in on one position on the defensive line? Where's General Hunt factor in? But McCollum's the guy that they were excited about early. They were excited about with the win, right, to get him committed. They liked what they saw with him as a freshman, and it feels like Terrence Jamison really empowered him to push and take a spot this spring. And how does that translate to fall camp and then into the season?
Yeah, and we don't get to see a lot of spring ball this year, but when we did, Angelo looked very good, just in his one-on-ones and team drills that we saw. But he's also playing with some starters at times. So it's just worth noting about that. And I think one role he could play is, General Hunt kind of late in the season after he kind of solidified his red shirt. He played in that dime package role as a guy who can get after the quarterback from the nose tackle position. Would not surprise me if Angelo McCollum was in that type of role. So something to watch out for there. I'm really high in his future. He's going to be a very important part of this defensive line moving forward. I want to throw one you didn't have on there on the offensive line. Tyler McMillan, the SEMO transfer tackle. They're bringing him in to compete, right? And I think mostly he's set to be the right tackle in 2026. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. But I think they feel pretty good about 4 starters on this offensive line with Josh Gesky, Josh Kreutz, obviously JC Davis and Melvin Priestley. But I do think Brandon Henderson's got to prove a little bit more. I would put my money on Brandon Henderson starting week 1, but it's clear they want to add some more competition, but also they need some depth at tackle, some ready to play depth at tackle. And while Aiden Knappich from Idaho came in, they want to redshirt him. He's not yet strong enough, I don't think, for what they want to do, but he should be the left tackle in 2026 with a hopeful redshirt this year. Tyler McMillan gives them a guy who can come into a game and they think compete, but also could he help push for a 5th starting spot there, be one of the top 5. You could move Melvin Priestley into guard. So if he has a strong camp and say Brandon Henderson just doesn't take a step forward, I think Tyler McMillan, at least Joey, could potentially be part of the rotation. Because if I'm Illinois, I might want to get Melvin. It's about winning, but I might want to get Melvin Priestley some snaps at guard to show for the NFL, because I think that's his best position there. I don't think they're going to make decisions based on that. But if the drop off of Tyler McMillan at right tackle gives them their best 5 with Priestley at right guard, I could see them doing that. So while I would still think Henderson's going to be that guy, I do think it'll be interesting to watch throughout training camp to see if McMillan can help push there.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of feels like what we thought of Melvin Priestley a year ago, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, he's running with the ones at this point, and he was no doubt
starter. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in that conversation, you have to throw Brandon Hanson in that mix. Some combination of Brandon Henderson, Brandon Hanson, and Tyler McMillan are going to be on the right side. How that shape, and then obviously Melvin Priestley's for sure going to be at one of those 2 positions, but Hanson has to be in that conversation too, along with McMillan. But that now you're starting to see some legitimate competition for that final starting spot, whether it ends up being tackle or guard, however that looks. So yeah, I like that McMillan vote in there, because I do think he could be a guy that's like the second week. It's like the first open practice we see. It's like, who's that at right tackle? I mean, I assume if he's in the 5, he's a tackle, not guard.
Yes.
Right. That I don't think he could be a guy who takes right guard. I think he takes right tackle.
320. So
right. Yeah. So yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch. But I could also see all of a sudden it's like, oh, Brandon Hanson's at right guard with the ones, because it sounds like he did take that leap, and he was someone that they did travel with last season. They really, kind of put him on the elevated development plan, or the fast track development plan, however you want to phrase it. Those three are going to be fighting for one of those right side positions. Can I go with an offense? Can we stay on offense? Khalil Valentine became an X factor as soon as Josh McCray entered the portal and went to Georgia, because now you need number 3 back. Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey, but now there's a good amount of snaps sitting there for Khalil Valentine to go in and to take. And injuries happen, and the 2 guys in front of him have had injury issues in the past, and Fagan and Lawfrey. Fagan's had 2 season-ending injuries, and you've got to mention that when you're talking about him until you don't, right? And it's kind of we've seen this before, like a Dre Brown, right? You got to talk about him until you don't talk about those injuries in the past anymore. But he was going to be in the rotation anyway, right? It was clear they liked the 4-headed monster idea. It just wasn't tenable it's not tenable to keep 4 top 2 running backs in pretty much every program all happy in the same room, or all enough snaps in the same room. So Valentine can be that quick guy. And I know Thad Ward talked to me about pass pro with him. That was a big offseason emphasis. Obviously, he said he had gotten bigger with Tank Wright in the offseason. I don't know how many pounds that is or what that looks like, but he was a guy who needed to add weight, needed to add strength, needed to refine his ability as a pass protector to make him a little bit more of a multi-down guy who can still get out in space and make people miss and use his speed to get away from people, because he's incredibly talented. And that speed is Lawfrey. He's probably as quick as Lawfrey, but Lawfrey's kind of quietly a bigger dude. Like he's got a lot of muscle to him, and Valentine's not there at this point yet in terms of the physical development, but his speed can match where Aiden Lawfrey's at. And you pair that with Caden Fagan's speed and size, and I do think you could like where that running back group is still.
Yeah, if they stay healthy. And that's why I'll throw in, it feels like an obligatory mention every podcast, but Jordan Anderson could be an X factor here if Caden Fagan gets hurt again. The 4th straight year of injury. I mean, we had 3 straight years of it happening with Caden Fagan dating back to high school. He's had now the foot injury, ankle injury. He's had a hip injury, and he's had a shoulder injury. All right. So like, he's just been injury prone. Maybe they're all freak things, but that's a lot of wear and tear on a guy already. And with Josh McCray gone, there's not another big back there. Like John Forster is coming in with some muscle on him, but he's not, I don't think he's going to plow through people. So if you need a short yardage guy, it's not your quarterback. So it's got to be a guy like Jordan Anderson going into a short gain role. So that'll be interesting to watch. If Caden Fagan goes down, I would imagine Jordan Anderson's got to go right back to that running back group.
Isn't it your quarterback? It's not? Because I feel like at this point, seeing Luke Altmaier where he is physically in the spring, if I would think the sneak could be back on the table. It wasn't something that
you could run some sneaks, but
I'm probably 1-2 yards.
I still don't think that. I'd rather give it to Jordan Anderson, is what I'm saying.
On the goal line, I mean, I'm seeing what Tommy DeVito did in Madison in 2022. Like, I think Luke Altmaier is physically.
He's had some strength. Are you saying Luke's like a big dude?
I'm saying, I think I would have been shocked in the last 2 seasons if I had seen a legitimate multiple sneaks out of Luke Altmaier. I don't feel like I would be shocked this year.
We saw it more last year for sure. So I do think he can do it. I think he's tough enough.
Like last year, it's like give it to Josh McCray, right? Like duh. You turn around and give it to him and let him score all the touchdowns he did. But I think you could reasonably sneak a little bit more with him. I don't know how many that's going to be, but I do think that's more on the table now with given where he is. I think I heard recently he was up like 12 pounds or so from last season. Like, I think that's probably more on the table than it has been at any point during his tenure at Illinois. Now, again, you're talking that those long 2-yard runs, those, stuff like that. Yeah, maybe that's a Jordan Anderson. That's obviously a Caden Fagan territory. Yeah. But those quick little goal line situations, let's just say
inches, 6 inches, yes. But if it's
for sure, a long 2 yards, I agree with that.
Give me the 6'3", 250-pound running back who's actually shown that he can do it. So I'm just saying, if Fagan gets hurt or something like that, Anderson could be a factor in some of those situations because he kind of was last year at some times. All right, give me another one, Joey.
It's Malik Elzy time. Like, we know Hudson Clement is, shouldn't say we know. We think Hudson Clement is going to be wide receiver 1. Like, if I had to pick who leads the team in receptions. Yeah, like if I had to pick right now who leads the team in receptions and yards, it's probably going to be Hudson Clement. But someone's got to start opposite of him. And this has been the Malik Elzy offseason, right? Like, just continuing to push him forward. And this is the biggest opportunity for a big role he's had during his college career. There's not a Pat Bryant in front of him. There's not a Casey Washington in front of him. There's not a Zachary Franklin in front of him. This is the time for him to go in there and take that starting spot. Don't give it back. Take those reps that you watch Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin play a ton of and show you can do it too, and be that target for Luke Altmaier because he's talented enough. He's big enough to be an impact player in the running game as a blocker. He's got everything you want. It's just there's been, whether it's his freshman year, he was a freshman adjusting to everything, and all of a sudden Casey Washington has his best season of his college career. Then you go in and you bring in Zachary Franklin. Now the door's wide open for Malik Elzy, and I know you've reported that they've tried to infuse the heck out of him with confidence to go in there and be, kind of what Justin Stepp used to say to Pat Bryant, you're the best receiver in the country. Go be that today. And it feels like they've given a similar approach with Malik Elzy this offseason.
Yeah, and I think of Malik, he kind of his first 2 years has done some things that were similar to Pat Bryant as a freshman. Pat Bryant had 6 catches for 98 yards in 10 games, played like 200 snaps, but was mostly a blocker, right? Like, I have no doubt Malik Elzy can block. I think he's the best blocker along with Colin Dixon in this group. So he's going to get on the field. Now, can you take the leap that Pat did as a sophomore? Now, can he do that? Elzy as a junior? Pat Bryant as a sophomore had 34 catches, 453 yards, 2 touchdowns. If I told you that was Malik Elzy's stat line, I feel great about it. Like, something along those lines tells me he's a starter, tells me he's making an impact, tells me he's earned the trust to be targeted by Luke Altmaier. I'd like a couple more touchdowns potentially out of that, but that would tell me Malik Elzy is starting to turn into the player we all think he can be. He's not the most dynamic athlete, but he's big, physical, and he's got hands. They're just been inconsistent so far. That's what he's got to show. So I think he can be a really good starter on this team. This is his best opportunity, but he's going to have to go earn it, man. Like Hudson Clement's going to get a lot of snaps. Colin Dixon's going to get a lot of snaps. We know Hank Beatty's going to be worked into that rotation because he's earned that as a trusted target. But also Alex Kapka-Jones and Justin Bullock. There's a lot of ways that like you can mix and match this group and play him in certain roles. Can Malik Elsie be more than just the big physical blocker? That's what he's got to prove.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There's a lot of competition. They added Justin Bullock for a reason, a guy who's another big physical wide receiver. Captain Jones is a long wide receiver. I do think there's a role for Braden Trimble, but we're not talking about it the same category, I think, of expected roles here as we're talking about with some of these other guys. But yeah, it's not just going to be, okay, you've been here, this is your third year. No doubt you. Like those guys who are going to push Malik and try to get those reps for themselves. Captain Jones has been around Illinois for a while at this point. So yeah, this is kind of his moment, right? To follow a similar Pat Bryant, really Casey Washington trajectory in terms of where you end up in terms of statistical production.
If you had to pick a guy in the secondary, who would it be?
I was literally just thinking that. I was like, man, we haven't named a secondary guy.
I got a couple of names on this.
I mean, it feels weird to have Jaheim Clark as an X factor because given what he did down the stretch of last season, but he's a third starter and he might end up being a starter. Right? I could see him trotting out there week one as one of the starters on this defense. So I find it feels weird putting him in there because you saw his role develop. But Mac Resetich, Jeremy,
had his name
like that dime safety that we've seen work its, that position has kind of grown from dime safety one year and then you become Kendall Smith or you become Matthew Bailey or however that ultimately shakes out. The hard part for Mac Resetich is Miles Scott is right there, free safety, and those two have overlapping positions. But you also saw Mac Resetich get meaningful snaps last season outside of just the dime package, and he's a good athlete. I don't know how it looks, but you've got to have his name on this list.
I had him, my top secondary guy, just because I was like, there's times I kind of wanted him out there more. I just felt like there's playmaking there. I feel like he was rangier at times than Miles Scott. Miles is a team captain. Yeah, he reminds me of Kendall Smith a lot, right? Like maybe not physically the elite athlete range-wise as some of these other guys, but really smart, going to be where he needs to be. And even if he's not like the strongest in run support, he rarely lets that one guy get by him, right? So, and that's one of the most important parts of that position. But Mac's got some physical things that are really exciting. And I'm interested to see if he is worked into that rotation and gets maybe a series or two for Miles Scott more than he did last year. Can I name a specialist here?
I hope you do.
Keelan Crimmins. The punting position has been a weakness since Blake Hayes left, right? Like Hugh Robertson had some good weeks, maybe some good months. It was really inconsistent, and it wasn't good enough last year. Last year, he really dipped. Illinois had the worst punting average in the Big Ten. Keelan Crimmins got a workout last year with Purdue and how bad that offense was. So he led the Big Ten in actual punts, but he also was an all Big Ten honorable mention, was really good. Hang time was way better than Hugh Robertson. Joey, we know how many close games Illinois plays. We've seen how field position can positively help Illinois and negatively impact Illinois in Brett Bielema's tenure. So I don't want to overlook what, more consistent and better punting can do for a team that plays so many close games like Illinois.
I love your commitment to make sure the specialists are brought up in every football offseason pod. I don't ever assign you stuff, but you've got the specialist position primer next month.
Punters are people too, Joe.
I'm sure you've got that thing already done. Just drop down notes every night about how you want to talk about specialists. But you're right. I mean, I don't know that it was consistently bad. Like Hugh Robertson had moments, but man, the bad moments came at really, really tough time. That's punting, right? No one really cares about your stats until you shank one in a critical position, especially in some of the elements that Illinois plays in. Keelan Crimmins is a good punter, and he's a guy who, he's not going to be your Torrey Taylor at Iowa where it's, like they're building statues of the guy, but he is going to be an asset and a flip the field asset. And if the defense is going to be what we think it can be, you would trust them to take advantage of that, flipping the field, and then ultimately get down the line of playing that field position game and setting your offense up in a good spot. So I like that pick. It's on brand for 2025.
Appreciate
Jeremy Werner, but I like the pick.
6th or 7th offensive lineman and a punter. So I'm definitely on brand in this podcast show. Can I throw a name at you that you can talk about?
Yeah.
Tyson Rooks. Go.
I'm interested. Like I that's as far like we haven't seen enough. We've heard a lot
Got a
about
pick at
Tyson
Oregon.
Rooks.
It was like one of the only good things that happened at Oregon was Tyson Rooks.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that because one, he's blocked by a future high round draft pick in Xavier Scott and a likely first team All Big Ten selection for the second straight year. But he's long. He's obviously rangy. There's still a lot of me that's surprised he's not in the safety room. Or a safety, a free safety, just given how long he is. But Aaron Henry really raved about him in spring ball. Is he your backup nickel? I mean, I think it's entirely possible. It depends on probably how you see Tyler Strain and where he fits in to that rotation. But it seems like they're ready to put a ton in for Tyson Rooks, or a ton of trust in for Tyson Rooks and let him blossom, which is interesting because, Jeremy, let's be honest, like when you see those position switches, your antennas go up. And he went to wide receiver, and that, it wasn't in the rotation. I did think there were times when we'd see him like, man, he kind of looks the part. He's a strong kid. He's long. He's got all of that. But he wasn't really close to the wide receiver rotation to get out there and make an impact, meaningful impact in a game. And then he goes back to DB. And again, your antennas go back up. It's like, you flip-flop positions now and back-to-back off seasons. That's not usually the greatest sign you've ever seen. But then you hear Aaron Henry just go over the moon about the guy. Like, oh, all right, they obviously really like what they've seen out of him, especially with that length. Now, can he that position in that slot position? If you've got that length, great. But you've also got to be quick and fluid enough to do that. And I know he's got the tennis background, and that's something that's been really appealing. And it sounds like he's doing a good job. But that would be my question mark with him: is can you be that fluid, quick twitch guy to go in there? That's such a tough position. Nickel is such a freaking tough spot, and you got Xavier Scott in front of you, but he's interesting. I don't know how much more I can go in on that yet,
No, it's so intriguing. I agree with you. I think he's the backup nickel, which we know Xavier Scott can be versatile. So there's some value and some playing time there for a guy like Tyson Rooks. And he got on the field last year, but he's 6'4", and usually they overestimate or they bump those numbers up. They might be bumping that number down. He might be 6'5" and 205 pounds. So just to see a defensive back like that, you don't see him often, which is why there's doubt. There's natural doubt. And we've asked this of Aaron Henry. It's like, you have long guys like that, takes them longer to change direction, right? That's just part of it. It's guys who are lower to the ground, they're quicker. Like Torrey Cox, why is he so sticky in coverage? It's because he doesn't got to move a lot. Like there's not long limbs. He's got to move and change his whole direction. So there's questions about that. But as you said, he's got a tennis background, so he does move pretty quick for his size. And just having that length in the middle of the field, you think about being on a slot receiver or some of these power slots, like Pat Bryant's going to be that in the NFL, it sounds like, to be able to wrap your arm around those guys and not have to pull on them, but get that long lever in the passing lane, that can be huge. Plus, he's that big. He's going to be probably pretty good in run support. So it's a really interesting kind of chess piece to see if this experiment works out, because it's really intriguing. We've never really seen anything like that before. 6'4", 6'5" nickelback.
Yeah, and as you mentioned that, watch how Illinois has approached offensively and defensively the power slot. You see a Colin Dixon, who you evolved from Isaiah Williams, who's a true what you would think of as a slot receiver. Colin Dixon has a little bit more of that bowling ball running back type of build to him at receiver. Then you look defensively, if teams are going to go to that, now it's like, well, maybe Tyson Rooks is your counter to that, or he's a guy who can hold up as football evolves, and you need now a bigger nickel to complement some of these, or to go against some of these bigger power slots. Xavier Scott does have versatility to go outside. I would say the thing that would stop him from doing that is on paper, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Right now. You have Caleb Patterson, you have Torrey Cox, you have Jaheim Clark. So you don't have to there was a point we thought Xavier Scott was going to be an outside cornerback until August 15th last year or something, right? And then oh no, they're keeping him in nickel. And obviously you can go on down the line of how that played out. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still fascinated by Jaheim Clark, but I have almost no frame of reference not Jaheim Clark, for Tyson Rooks, but I have almost no frame of reference for what to expect with him.
All right, I want to throw 3 of these at you. They're part of the coaching staff as X factors, okay? Aaron Henry in year 3. I am so interested to see how this defense evolves, right? Because the Big Ten started to kind of figure out the Ryan Walters defense, I think, the last couple of years, and Aaron Henry dealt with that his first year, dealt with being a first-time play caller. Ryan Walters and Kevin Kane dealt with it as well at Purdue. But last year, they made great strides, and there was just different looks. Like, there were some of the things we saw throughout the season with the sub packages, Joey, but also, like, they were showing like a 3-3-5 or 3-3-5 look late in the year that was really interesting to me. I'm interested to see if they do that, but you have to continue and evolve. And one thing about Illinois is I wrote about this weekend, Barry Loney is now the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the Big Ten. Aaron Henry is one of the top 3, tied for 3rd in the Big Ten as defensive coordinators at 3 years. These guys usually don't stick around very long because if they're good, they go get head coaching jobs or get poached by a SEC program or whatever. And if you're bad, you just get fired right away. So that continuity is a good thing for Illinois, but teams now know you a little bit, right? They have the book on you. So how you evolve, how you change. I thought Aaron Henry did that really well, especially towards the back half of last year, was really impressive. So I think that's an X factor. Just see how that defense evolves with some of the pieces they've added, kind of loaded up with some interesting linebackers. And Archie McDaniel's been an interesting piece there of how he's kind of impacted the defense at that position. So he's just an interesting one. And 2 other guys I want to mention. Joe Kim, the Taekwondo man, pass rush specialist in the NFL. How does he help unlock Gabe Backus even more? Leon Lowry, Alec Bryant, your boy Joe Barna, JoJo Hayden, even some of these, James Thompson, all of that. The other guy I want to mention is Mike New, the former Ball State head coach. 2 of his former players are on this roster now. Justin Bullock and Christian Abney, who are part of the passing game equation there. So we'll see how big those roles are, but I just find that interesting. But he was Drew Brees' quarterback coach at one time with the New Orleans Saints. Took a Ball State job. It's a very tough job. Didn't have a great record there, but did win his division in that COVID year. So those are 2 interesting staff additions as analysts or kind of like extra coaches that I find interesting that maybe we won't know the whole impact of, but just interesting guys to watch.
Yeah, agreed on all that. I do want to build on the Aaron Henry and the sub packages are an X factor because it felt like as 2023 teams knew how to attack Illinois. We saw they knew how to attack Purdue, very similar to
especially Andy Kotelnicki, by the way.
Yeah, very similar, same defenses. Then Aaron Henry, I thought the best, most encouraging parts of this defense was the way that they mixed into that turbo package, that third down, bring all the speed you've got out there. The way you're, able to sub package your way out of this, and how much do you build on that? What have you done this offseason to build on that, to maximize a guy? Some of those more, very vastly different pieces in your position room. Your JoJo Hayden gave back the same position, 2 wildly different builds, right? But how do you maximize on that and get the most out of some of those guys who aren't every down starters, but can really be meaningfully impact you defensively? So that is the thing I'm most interested about with this defense going into training camp is how have you added any? Have you kind of shuffled pieces around? Do you plan on going to that more? Like, we know what your base defense is, but is your sub package defense something that you're very comfortable running a higher percentage of the time than you did last season? When I say sub package defense, I mean some of those more like, holy crap, they've got a lot of speed out there. Yep. Positions, or maybe they have a big, power sub pack, just things along those lines. That just there's so many returning starters. I don't feel like we need to overthink the impact of some of those, but how do they get maybe those intermediate roster guys who are past the developmental stage but not quite ready to take a starting job? How do you get those guys to have impacts?
Anything else you want to add, Joey? I think we covered them all that we wanted to cover. I'm sure we'll get a lot in the comments that we didn't mention this guy, but those are just some of the guys I wanted to highlight there.
No, I got nothing more. That was it's different, right? I mean, X Factor is not quarterback anymore. Last season, X Factor would have been Luke Altmaier. Can he bounce back from 2023? He very much did do that. And I think the way they attack the transfer portal, you don't have to have X Factors on. We named 1 defensive lineman. They lost 3 starters, but they did a good job in the transfer portal. That James Thompson isn't an X Factor. Tommy Waderjai isn't an X Factor. Kurt Neal is, like, those guys are likely starters on this. You could have maybe mentioned Pat Farrell in that mix. I think if you go on down the line there, but the retention, the top end proven Power 5, Power 4 transfers they brought in, I think that let us get down a little bit further into the roster, right? And fewer career snap counts.
Yeah, and like it didn't feel like we mentioned somebody that like the season is riding on, right? Like this is such a deep roster. They have so many answers. They have so many guys that can come in and compete. Of course, health at some of those most important positions is an X factor in any season. And you can't, take a big step back at some of those places, but they have options. And that's what this spring and this transfer portal really felt like it was, just making sure that, if somebody gets hurt, we don't have a huge hole outside of quarterback, right? And even Ethan Hampton, you feel like if it's a game or two, can come in and help you compete in a game. If you got a strong running game and defense, which I think they expect to have. So it's an exciting season because of that and huge expectations, because that we'll continue to preview it on this podcast moving forward. Jay Lehman's going to join me later in the week.
Is that the last X factor we actually need to talk about, is managing and handling this incredibly high expectations for this team?
It's a huge storyline. Yeah, because they didn't do it in 2023, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now you can look back at 2023 in hindsight and see the obvious roster holes that were left in terms of, secondary offensive line. But Illinois football actually building on a good season with another good season is an X factor, because it's just historically, and this team, these players, Brett Bielema, the coaching staff, shouldn't have to wear the weight of that because they weren't here for a lot of that, short of 2023. But people who have followed this program for years and years and years, like, that is kind of an X factor going into this, is managing and handling all of that in the way that you're perceived, the way people are talking about you, thinking about you, analyzing everything you do. Like, that matters. And I think that's a big storyline this year.
Yeah. And it's why I've kind of asked, we've talked about it. I get why people think this team could win 10 plus games. I get why people think this could be a sneaky college football playoff contender. It's really hard to win 10 plus games. It is really, really hard. So to me, it's not like 10 wins or bust for the season. That would certainly be a successful season, no doubt about it. But like, there are other ways that this could be a successful year to build on what you did last year, to make sure that you're sustaining success. This is what this has all been about. Bringing in Brett Bielema was to make sure that you can go into every year thinking, one, we're going to make a bowl game, but how good can we be? Can we sneak into the college football playoff? Can we contend atop the Big Ten? Like, this team is capable of doing that, but you got to show you can do it once, right? Like, back-to-back years, to think that you can do it year after year after year. And that's, to me, what this season is all about, is whether it's 8-4, 10-2, like, just making sure you continue that momentum and don't let it backslide. Don't let doubt creep in of what this program is going to be 3 years from now, like happened in 2008, like happened in 2002.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how it plays out. I believe the talent on this roster, the coaching staff on this roster, those experiences of 2023, and some of your most impactful players having gone through that, dealt with that, like, that'll help. And just the depth is obviously so much better than we've seen it at any point during Brett's tenure.
And you mentioned it, the coaching staff. I think they've earned that respect and that trust for what they've done so far with this program. All right, we got plenty more coming on the podcast later this week. Jay Lehman. Also have Isaac Trotter and Michael Tulip with our Big Ten basketball offseason roundtable. We'll get to that later in the week. But for Joey Wagner, thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer